Imagine you want to steal $70 million from one of the most secure financial institutions in the country. You could try to overpower the guards. You could hack the alarm system. You could blow the vault doors. But every one of those approaches has the same fatal flaw. Somebody sees you coming. Now imagine a different plan, one where nobody sees you at all, not because you're invisible, but because you're underneath them. This is the story of a man who didn't walk through the front door or the back door or any door. He came up through the floor. And for 96 days, while banks opened and closed above him, while security guards made their rounds, while the entire city of Fortaleza went about its life, he was down there in the dark, digging. What happened next became the largest bank robbery in Brazilian history. And the most baffling part, it nearly worked completely. His name was Luis Fernando Ribeiro. By 2004, he was in his early 40s, and he had something most bank robbers don't: insider knowledge. He had spent years working in bank security. He knew how vaults were built, how alarm systems were designed, and more importantly, he knew exactly where the weak points were. And the weak point he had identified in the Central Bank of Brazil's Fortaleza branch wasn't the door, it wasn't the walls, it was the floor. Ribeiro assembled a small inner circle in Sao Paulo, not a gang of reckless criminals, but a calculated team of professionals. He brought in a civil engineer with a background in underground construction, a former bank employee who understood vault layouts and guard rotations, a locksmith specializing in high-security systems, and a financial operative who knew how to move large amounts of cash without raising flags. When Ribeiro spread a map of the central bank on the table, the engineer didn't laugh. He studied it. He calculated the geology of Fortaleza, its sandy topsoil, its clay layers, its underground infrastructure, and after a long silence, he said it was possible. Hard, risky, and expensive, but possible. The tunnel would need to run approximately 80 meters. That's more than 250 feet of underground passage, at least 3 meters below the surface, wide enough for a man to crawl through with a bag of dirt. They estimated 4 months of nightly digging to pull it off, and at the end of it, they'd come up directly beneath the vault's floor, below the motion sensors, below the cameras, below everything. Ribeiro's logic was elegant. Most heists fail because of time pressure. You have 3 minutes before police respond, maybe 5. But if you've already been inside the building for weeks before anyone knows you're there, time stops being the enemy. Within 2 weeks, he had expanded the crew to 25 people. Each man had a defined role. Each was promised an equal share. The math was simple and intoxicating. $70 million, 25 ways, roughly $2.8 million per person. The plan was in motion. In February 2005, Ribeiro rented a small 2-bedroom house on a quiet street in Fortaleza. It sat just 256 feet from the central bank in a straight line. He told the landlord he was starting a landscaping business. He paid 3 months in cash, no questions asked. The crew set up the cover immediately. They painted a sign, parked a white van out front, stocked the garage with rakes, bags of artificial turf, gardening equipment. To every neighbor on that street, it looked exactly like what it claimed to be, a small landscaping startup. But behind that garage door, they pulled up the floor tiles in the back bedroom and started digging. The first obstacle hit them immediately. The soil was harder than the engineer had projected, dense clay mixed with rock. Progress in that first week was painfully slow. They adjusted, brought in pneumatic drills and reinforced shovels, built a vertical shaft downward, lined it with wooden support beams, then pivoted horizontally and began the long crawl toward the bank. 2 men worked at a time, rotating every 4 hours. One dug, one loaded dirt into buckets. The buckets were passed back through the shaft up to the surface, where another team loaded them into the white van. Every night, the van made multiple trips across the city, dumping soil at construction sites, empty lots, anywhere that wouldn't attract a second glance. The conditions inside were brutal. The tunnel was barely wide enough for a single body. The air was thin and hot. The walls felt like they were pressing in from every side. They rigged a ventilation system, PVC pipes running from the house, a small electric fan pushing fresh air through. It helped, but barely. By the end of March, they had dug 100 feet. Halfway. Then came the complications. At 180 feet, they hit a water pipe, not catastrophic, but enough to flood the tunnel with mud. The engineer rerouted the dig around it, adding distance but avoiding disaster. At 220 feet, they encountered something far more dangerous. Active underground electrical cables connected to the city's power grid. Cut the wrong one, and the lights go out across a chunk of Fortaleza. The utility company investigates, the tunnel gets found, game over. The engineers spent hours studying the cables, identifying which were live, which were dormant. Carefully, methodically, they rerouted 2 of them along the tunnel walls and moved on. By late April, they were 6 feet from the bank's foundation. Then came the hardest part. The bank sat on 4 feet of reinforced concrete packed with steel rebar. To get through it, they needed diamond-tipped industrial drill bits, the kind designed for cutting through solid stone. Loud, expensive, unavoidable. They waited for a Saturday night when the city's ambient noise would mask the sound, and they drilled. By 4 a.m. on Sunday, August 6, 2005, the drill punched through into open air. They were in the bank's basement. They didn't move immediately. Patience had gotten them this far. One man climbed up into the basement, shone a flashlight around. Concrete walls, storage boxes, cleaning supplies, and directly above him, a metal grate bolted into the ceiling. That grate opened into the vault. They retreated, waited for Saturday night to become Sunday evening, when the bank would be fully closed for the weekend, when they'd have 48 uninterrupted hours. At 10 p.m. on August 6th, they went back in. The grate wasn't alarmed. Why would it be? Nobody designs a security system expecting someone to drill up through the floor. They removed the bolts, lifted the grate, and climbed up into the vault of the Central Bank of Brazil. What they found was staggering. Metal shelves lined with boxes, each one packed tight with bundled banknotes, hundreds of real notes, 50s, more money than most people see in several lifetimes, stacked floor to ceiling. They worked in a human chain, one man in the vault loading bags, one in the basement. 6 men stretched the length of the tunnel, passing bags hand to hand like a conveyor belt. Each bag weighed about 25 pounds and held roughly 500,000 reais. The van made trip after trip into the night. By midnight, they had 50 bags, $10 million. By 2 a.m., 100 bags, $20 million. By 4 a.m., 200 bags, $40 million. There was a moment of crisis around that hour. One of the men inside the tunnel had a panic attack, claustrophobia, fear, exhaustion. He dropped his bag and scrambled backward, knocking a support beam loose. Dirt fell. Everyone froze. For a few seconds, nobody breathed. The engineer called out calm instructions. They steadied the beam. The tunnel held. The shaken man was helped out. They kept going. By Sunday morning, they paused to avoid the daylight. By Sunday night, they went back in and finished the job. When they finally climbed out of the tunnel for the last time, the vault was essentially empty. Total take, 164.8 million reais, approximately 70 million US dollars. Ribeiro looked at his crew, 25 men, filthy, exhausted, and unimaginably wealthy. He told them to go home, act normal, don't spend anything suddenly, don't draw attention. They'd divide everything once things cooled down. The house on that quiet street sat still and silent. 256 feet away, the central bank had no idea it had just been hollowed out. Monday morning, a bank manager arrived for a routine vault inspection. He walked in, looked at the shelves, and stopped cold. Empty. All of it. Gone. No broken doors, no triggered alarms, no sign of forced entry anywhere in the building. Security scrambled. Police were called. Federal agents arrived. They were completely baffled until someone noticed a metal grate on the vault floor sitting slightly out of place. They looked down into the hole beneath it and saw the tunnel disappearing into darkness. Officers crawled all 250 feet of it and emerged inside the fake landscaping company's house. By then, it was abandoned. Some artificial turf samples, a painted sign, a few gardening tools. That was all that remained. The heist itself was perfect. What came after was not. 3 weeks later, a man walked into a car dealership in Fortaleza and paid for a brand new car entirely in cash, crisp sequential 100 real notes still in their original bank wrapping. The salesman thought something felt off. He called the federal police. That one phone call unraveled everything. Officers followed the buyer to 2 other crew members. Simultaneous raids turned up more money, still in central bank packaging. 3 arrests led to names. Names led to more arrests. By September, 8 crew members were in custody. Ribeiro saw the walls closing in and fled to Paraguay, carrying roughly $8 million across the border in hidden luggage. He kept a low profile for a while, But isolation wore him down, and he started making calls back to Brazil, calls that police were already monitoring. They triangulated his location. Paraguayan authorities placed him under surveillance. In November 2005, just 4 months after the most successful heist in Brazilian history, Luis Fernando Ribeiro was arrested walking to a cafe. He didn't run, he just sighed. He was extradited, tried, and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. But here's the part that makes this story unforgettable. Of the $70 million stolen, police recovered only $8 million. 13 crew members were arrested, 12 were never identified, never caught, never found. Those 12 people walked away with somewhere around $50 million. And as far as anyone knows, they're still walking free today. The tunnel took 96 days to build. The investigation took years and still came up short. And most of that money? It's simply gone. Ribeiro went to prison, but more than half his crew got exactly what they came for.